Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about a case that has been in the news a lot recently. In February 2017, Abigail Williams and Liberty German were murdered in Delphi, Indiana, and the case went unsolved for almost 6 years. Until just a couple of months ago, an arrest was finally made. So in this video, I'm just going to go through the whole case and then we'll get into who was arrested, who is he, what the evidence is, and ultimately what led investigators to him. But before we get into the case, I just want to say that if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more true crime content. So Delphi is a town in the state of Indiana, and it's northwest of Indianapolis. It's in Carroll County, and the population is under 3,000, so it's a really small town. Delphi has a lot of farmland and is known for having a lot of really nice nature trails and good hiking spots. And just overall, it's a really cute little town and has a really close-knit community. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on the victims. This is Abigail Williams, she went by Abby, and this is Liberty German, she went by Libby. And they were in the 8th grade at Delphi Community Middle School where they met. Abby was 13 and Libby was 14 at the time of their deaths. These two were best friends and apparently did almost everything together. Both girls were really involved in a bunch of different activities. They were on a softball team together, both played volleyball and a couple other sports. They were really into sports. And they also played in the school band and loved arts and crafts. I saw an interview that Kendall Ray did here on YouTube with Kelsey German, who is Liberty German's older sister. And in that interview, Kelsey German said that the night before the murders, Libby and Abby were actually hanging out at Libby's house having a painting night. Kelsey also said in that interview that she and her sister were really close and that both girls were really close with their families. Now let's go through what happened on February 13th, 2017. Abby and Libby had the day off of school. It was a Monday, and they had decided to go for a hike on the Monon High Bridge Trail, which is part of the Delphi Historic Trails. It was a common place for people to go hiking and take pictures there. It was a really beautiful scenic area. The trail is known for the Monon High Bridge, which is an old railway bridge that goes over a river, but it hasn't been used for that since the 80s, so it's just a walking bridge now. Although it's pretty old and doesn't look the most secure, so I would not walk on that bridge, but apparently a lot of people do. Anyway, the girls wanted to go for a hike and take pictures on the Monon High Bridge. Libby's older sister, Kelsey, dropped the girls off at the trail around 1:30 p.m. And the plan was that they were just gonna spend a short while there and then Libby's father would come and pick them up at 3:15 p.m. At 2:07 p.m., Libby posted this photo of Abby on the Monon High Bridge, and after this, the girls were not heard from again. And then Libby's father showed up at the trail at 3:15 p.m. and couldn't get a hold of them. They didn't meet him where they were supposed to meet, so he decided to go out and start looking for them. But he wasn't able to locate them. So he ended up calling some of the other family members and they came out to help him look for the girls. They just searched around the parts of the trails that they knew the girls liked to go to and, were calling out their names, but they didn't have any luck. Panic really started to set in around 5:30 p.m. and there had been no sign of the girls, so the family decided to go ahead and call the police. The police initially didn't suspect any foul play and assumed that the girls had just gotten lost on the trail, although the families were pretty sure there was more to it than that from the start. Police came out to the trail and the police and the families searched for the girls for hours until the search was finally called off around midnight. The plan was that they would continue the search the next morning when the sun finally came up because it was starting to get dangerous for people to be wandering this trail late at night. The next day was Valentine's Day and the family showed up really early at the trail with the police to start looking. They were obviously really stressed since the entire night had gone by without any word from either of the girls. A huge search party had formed with so many members of the Delphi community, and even people from outside of Delphi came to help search for the girls. They searched the surrounding woods, the trail, and the creek under the bridge, just looking for any sign of the girls. The police brought K9 units, drones, as well as divers searched the creek. The police believed at that time that the girls' phones were actually turned off right after Libby had posted that Snapchat story of Abby, so it's not like they were able to use their phones to track their location. And then at 12 p.m., one of the searchers found a shoe. And shortly after that, the girls' bodies were discovered. Their bodies were found about half a mile from the Monon Bridge on the north bank of the creek that ran under the bridge. The creek was called Deer Creek. Then the Indiana State Police held a press conference and informed the public that they were launching an investigation into the double homicide of Abby and Libby.
That's state police talking about the fear and concern in a small town community after they announced that 2 missing girls were in fact victims of murder.
Investigators solemnly identified the 2 bodies found in Carroll County as 13-year-olds Libby German and Abby Williams. Now, we still don't know what happened to them after they disappeared during an afternoon hiking trip.
Autopsies were performed right away, and the estimated time of death was somewhere between 2:07 p.m. when the Snapchat story was posted and around 4 p.m. that day. How the girls were killed, or really any condition about the bodies, has never been released to the public. There's a lot of speculation about why this might be, but it's most likely because the police don't want to compromise any future trial, but it also could be that it's just too gruesome to share with the public. As you can imagine, this was absolutely devastating for the families and the community. The Delphi community was extremely supportive of the girls' family and friends after the news broke. They held many vigils for the girls, and a lot of people put ribbons on their porches and trees outside their homes. A blue one for Libby and a purple one for Abby to show support for the families. And volunteers set up all kinds of fundraisers in honor of the girls. There was a food drive, a car wash, and things like that. And the family was so grateful for all the support they received from the community during this really hard time. Everyone was just so heartbroken for these girls. Like, they were just trying to enjoy their day off of school, and they were only at the trail for such a short time. Like, how could something like this happen? A lot of the Delphi residents described the day that the news broke as a "where were you when you heard" moment, and it's something that the community might never get over. A lot of people, not surprisingly, felt really on edge and scared after what had happened. Like, how could you ever go to that trail again and hike there and not be scared and looking over your shoulder the entire time? Okay, so now let's go through the investigation. The first thing the police did was clear any of the family members from any involvement. It sounds like they interviewed Kelsey German quite extensively because she was the last person to see the girls alive, but they were able to conclude that she was not involved. And then the police got a hold of the girls' phones that were found with their bodies and took a look at them and found something pretty shocking. On February 15th, so the day after the bodies were found, the police released this photo, which was recovered from Libby's phone. It's pretty grainy, but you can see a man walking on the Monon Bridge towards the girls. A couple days later, the police revealed that the picture's actually from a video with audio. And in the video, you can hear the man say, "Guys, down the hill."
Guys, down the hill. Guys, down the hill.
This video is very eerie, and you're not able to really get a good look of the man's face, but you are able to see what he's wearing. This man was quickly named the prime suspect in the murders. I mean, why else would they be taking a video of him if they didn't feel threatened by him? Apparently there was more evidence found on Libby's phone, but the police have never released this because they don't want to compromise a future trial. Libby has since been regarded as a hero for having the presence of mind to take her phone out and record evidence of the killer. And this video would later prove to be the most important element of this investigation and tracking down who did this. After the video was released to the public, floods of tips started coming in and the case started gaining national attention. There was a lot of pressure on investigators, and the police announced a $41,000 reward for a tip leading to an arrest. The reward was later increased to $200,000 the next month. And by that point, the police had received 11,000 tips, and there were a couple persons of interest identified. On February 25th, the Indiana State Police and FBI obtained a search warrant of a man's home who was connected to a fake social media account that was using photos of a male model to pose as someone else to communicate with underage girls and receive sexually explicit photos from them. The profile was called Anthony_shots and mainly used Snapchat and Instagram to communicate with these underage girls. And police were able to track down Keegan Klein as the user of the Anthony Shots account. Police started narrowing in on Klein when, a few days after the girls' bodies were found in Delphi, a school-aged girl in Galveston in Cass County, Indiana, had given her address to Anthony Shots. A day later, she came home to find a man in a ski mask looking into her bedroom window as she got off the school bus. She and her parents immediately contacted the police, and she was able to make the connection with giving Anthony Shots her address and then the man showing up at their house. Police were able to track down Klein as the user of the Anthony Shots account and raided his home in Peru in Miami County, where Klein lived with his father. They found over 100 photos and videos of underage girls on several electronic devices. He was arrested and charged with 30 counts of possession of child. I can't say it here on YouTube, but I'm sure you can put it together what he was charged with. But how this ties into the Delphi murders is that Libby was actually in communication with the Anthony Shots account the day she was murdered. In fact, the person behind the Anthony Shots account was the last person to communicate with Libby before her death. And after her death, the Anthony Shots account told another person that they were supposed to meet up with Libby, but she never showed up. We don't know where they were supposed to meet up or when, but I'm sure the police know that and just haven't released that information to the public. But you can assume it was pretty bad because the police were fully pursuing Klein as the main person of interest in the murders. But shockingly, Klein was never charged and investigators were never able to tie him to the crime scene or being on the Monon High Bridge that day or anything like that. Apparently, there was a chance that Klein's father could have had access to the Anthony Shots account, and he had a pretty bad criminal history with sexual harassment. And obviously, Klein denies having anything to do with the murders, and he denies being at that girl's house in Galveston. So I guess police just didn't have enough evidence. So Klein has been sitting in jail since 2017, and his trial for all the photos and videos is supposed to take place later this year. Luckily, police were able to get this scumbag off the streets before he could catfish anyone else. The next thing investigators looked into was the property where the girls were found. On March 17th, investigators searched the property of Ron Logan. Logan's property backs onto the Monon High Bridge Trail, and the girls' bodies were actually found on his property line. But the police didn't find anything that would indicate that he was involved in this, and they quickly ruled him out as a suspect. It seems like anybody could access his property from the trail. On July 17th, so 5 months after the murders, the police released a composite sketch of the prime suspect. And based off of the hat in the photo, you can tell that it's supposed to be the man from the video. The sketch is based off of an eyewitness account of a hiker that the witness saw on the Monon High Bridge Trail the day the girls went missing. The man is believed to be in his 40s or 50s and weigh over 200 pounds. Investigators received a lot of tips from the public about people who looked like the sketch, but they didn't get any real leads until September 2017. In September, police interviewed Daniel Nations, who was arrested in Colorado for threatening hikers with a hatchet. Apparently, Daniel was homeless in Delphi around the time of the murders. And he kind of looks like the sketch, but police weren't able to conclude if he was even on the trail that day or tie him to any element of the case. So there isn't really a lot of information on it other than that, but yeah, he was ruled out. Then the case and the leads slowed down for a bit, and Libby's grandparents made a statement asking the public for help.
To really study the picture and listen to the audio clip, someone out there knows this person or persons. He's someone's neighbor, coworker, family member, friend, husband, or acquaintance. If and when any new information is released by law enforcement, please take another minute from your day to review all the information and help us collect the pieces of this puzzle. Both of our families are requesting everyone to please help Abby and Libby. Look for someone who's recently changed their appearance, cut their hair, shaved, or started wearing different clothes. Have they changed in some strange manner that just seems a little odd? If you think it could be, but then say, no, he's not like that, Go with your initial instinct. Let law enforcement run that information and make that determination. However small it may seem, it is extremely vital to capture every tip we can get. Please, we need your help.
And the next thing didn't happen for another 2 years in 2019. The police actually released a second sketch, but it really confused the public. This is the second sketch, and it looks nothing like the first. It's honestly pretty unclear, but I think I was able to clear up what's going on here. Basically, when this sketch was released, the police got so many questions about why this sketch looked so different from the first. And the police were pretty vague about it and just said that they're taking a new direction in the investigation and this is actually what the suspect looks like. But the source of the confusion was more about if they were supposed to be the same person or the second sketch was a different suspect altogether. And then the Indiana State Police did confirm that it is a different person. They said this person is between the ages of 18 and 40 and is significantly younger than the person in the first sketch. They also said that they believe that the person is a member of the Delphi community.
To the killer, who may be in this room, we believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know, and one day you will.
We don't know how the police knew this, but they were working with the FBI to get a profile of the killer, so that's maybe where this came from. But this obviously really scared everybody living in Delphi to know that you're living among a killer. And the sketch left a lot of people feeling really defeated, like they had been keeping their eyes out for essentially the wrong person for the last 2 years. And then again, the case stalled and there were no new leads, and the Delphi community was really on edge knowing that the killer was still at large. But the family tried to remain hopeful and stated that they have faith in law enforcement to bring justice to Abby and Libby. In 2021, the Delphi community started building a new park dedicated to Abby and Libby. The park has 3 softball diamonds, which was the sport they loved, as well as a bunch of picnic areas, playgrounds, an amphitheater, etc. The park was to keep their memory alive and just for the community to show the families how much Abby and Libby were missed. And from what I can tell, the park has been completed and it's just a really nice place for the Delphi community and families to enjoy. And then between 2019 and 2022, there were only like 1 or 2 more persons of interest named, but police were eventually able to rule those people out. And also the police asked the public multiple times for anyone who had been communicating with the Anthony Shots social media account to come forward. But that was about it, and the family started to wonder if the case would ever be solved. But then on October 28th, 2022, so just a couple of months ago, there was a major development in the case. And I actually remember this day. I follow Kelsey German on Twitter, and I remember she tweeted something, and the last line was, "Today is the day," and I think everybody was excited and knew that something good was finally happening in this case. Later that day, the police announced that they had arrested Richard Allen and charged him for the 2017 murders of Abby and Libby. They announced his arrest with very few details, and pretty much all we knew for the first couple of weeks was that he was 50 years old, was married, lived in Delphi, and worked at a CVS, and the CVS was only 5 minutes away from the crime scene. In fact, Libby's grandmother said she remembered he once printed off photos for the family at that CVS. The police did not disclose to the public how he was connected to the murders or any of the evidence, and the probable cause affidavit was sealed. Apparently, the prosecution argued that the documents should remain sealed because they didn't want to compromise a future trial, and they also thought another person might be involved. But Allen's defense team actually argued that the documents should be unsealed because they believe the case against him is pretty weak. And ultimately, the judge decided to go ahead and unseal the documents about a month after Allen's arrest. However, some details and the names of the witnesses were redacted from the documents before they were released to the public. So keep in mind that there could be more evidence that wasn't disclosed. Okay, so let's go through the prosecution's case against Richard Allen. I think the biggest bombshell was that police actually interviewed Allen back in 2017. Apparently, in that interview, he told police that he was at the Monon High Bridge Trail on the days that the girls went missing. In fact, he told police that he was on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m., which is the exact window that the girls were murdered in. Apparently, he came forward to the police with tip information that he had seen 3 teenagers on the trail around the time the girls were murdered. But in the process of reporting that tip, he had to give up to police that he was also at the crime scene that day. So as you can imagine, everybody was wondering why he was only arrested now. So it turns out that what he reported and his tip and what was said in the interview was actually filed incorrectly, and that's why the tip was missed by investigators. Basically, somebody mislabeled it or misfiled it, so it didn't show up in the right location during a data search. And as the case stalled, that's when police went back to the very beginning. And that's when they discovered the interview with Allen and what prompted them to start taking a closer look at him. And suddenly, some of the evidence they had started to click, and investigators were finally starting to put the pieces together. The first piece of evidence is there was an unused bullet found between the girls' bodies. And investigators were able to trace this bullet back to a gun that Allen owned. The affidavit specifically said the round was unspent and had extraction marks on it. The document said that investigators searched Allen's home and found many knives and firearms, including a .40 caliber pistol. The state police laboratory performed ballistics on the pistol and determined the unspent bullet had gone through Allen's pistol. And remember, the police never released how the girls were killed, but maybe this means that they were shot. The second category of evidence is basically what Allen told police. In October 2022, when investigators were closing in on Allen, they interviewed him again. And again, he admitted to being on the Delphi Historic Trails on the day of the murders. And he said that he had walked on the Monon High Bridge. And he told investigators he was wearing blue jeans and a blue or black Carhartt jacket that day. Police also interviewed Kathy, who is his wife, and she confirmed that Allen still owned a blue Carhartt jacket. The last category of evidence is that many witnesses said they saw someone who resembled Allen on the historic trails that day, and at one point, he was covered in blood. Multiple witnesses said they saw a man who looked like the man in the Down the Hill video. One juvenile witness told police she saw a kind of creepy man wearing blue jeans and a blue jacket walking towards the bridge. Another said that she actually said hi to him and he just glared back at her and kept his hands in his pockets. And then roughly 2 hours after Libby had recorded the Down the Hill video, a hiker saw a man covered in blood on the trail. According to the document, the witness advised that the male subject was wearing a blue-colored jacket and blue jeans and was muddy and bloody. And she further stated that it looked like he had gotten into a fight. So to sum all this witness evidence up, investigators were pretty confident that the man in the Down the Hill video was the murderer, and the fact that witnesses saw a man wearing the same thing as in the video covered in blood, and Allen told investigators that he was wearing the same outfit, just kind of ties it all together. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot there. And he also told investigators that he would never allow anyone to borrow any of his guns. He claimed he had no idea why the unspent bullet was near the bodies, and he denied any involvement in the murders of Abby and Libby. If Allen really does still have that blue jacket, the police need to test it for DNA. And if they are able to find either Abby or Libby's DNA on that jacket, it would just be the nail in the coffin. This was obviously really shocking to the families and everybody in Delphi that the murderer was hiding in plain sight for almost 6 years.
Yeah, it's a little disheartening that a member of our community could do this. Can do this to somebody within their own community, or just do this, period. But you can never judge a book by its cover, I don't know what makes people do stuff like this. You know, this happens all over the world, not just in our case, but there's a lot of people out there who suffer from stuff like this, right? Very similar situations. I don't know why somebody, I don't know how, can't program my mind to think like that. You know, it's hard. How can somebody do that and then just go on living life like nothing happened?
This bar owner in Delphi said Alan was a regular patron at his bar. The bar is called JC's Bar. And he said he seemed like a completely normal guy. He said that Alan and his wife came in 3 to 4 times a week, laughed with other regulars, partook in conversation about what happened to the teens and how awful it must be for their families. The victims' families were also regular patrons of this bar. And there is this really eerie photo of Alan and his wife supposedly at this bar, and you can clearly see the sketch of the suspect behind them, literally hiding in plain sight. And a bunch of people who regularly went to the CVS said he was a completely normal guy, really friendly, and they would have never expected that he would have been the killer. Alan has pleaded not guilty to the charges and is being held without bail. Jury selection will be done in another county because of the extreme media scrutiny and in an attempt to get the most impartial jury as possible. What's really shocking to me is why on earth would Alan tell investigators that he was on the trail that day? And then proceed to tell them it was in the same window that the girls were murdered in, and he was wearing the same thing that their prime suspect was seen wearing. And then also tell them that you would never let anyone borrow your guns. Like, that just takes away any possible chance of explaining away why that bullet was found near the bodies. You know, and it makes you think maybe the guilt was really getting to him and he did just want to come clean. And you never know what police said in that interview. Maybe he thought they were already onto him. Does Alan look like the sketch? I mean, maybe. He looks more like the first sketch. I personally feel like Keegan Kline looks like the second sketch. The affidavit never mentioned any involvement of a second person, even though the prosecution said that was one of the reasons why they wanted the documents to remain sealed. But I still find that whole Anthony Shots thing to be really weird. I mean, how could that not be related to this? Kline was clearly a predator, and he or whoever else had access to that account showed up at a girl's house in a ski mask. And then he also just happened to be in contact with Libby German and was supposed to meet her. And what are the odds that Alan meets Libby first and harms her before Kline has an opportunity to meet Libby in person? I don't know. Maybe it's just a really unfortunate coincidence. And maybe there's a chance that Alan and Kline knew each other. I hope that some of these questions get answered in the trial, and, you know, investigators might still be looking into Kline and the connection there, because I just think it's such a weird coincidence. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it interesting. This case is obviously still ongoing, and I think the trial will be really interesting to follow, and I will do an update video down the line when more things come out about this case. I really hope that Abby and Libby can finally get justice and their families can get some closure. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.